Welcome to HurricaneCenterLive.com. I'm Alex Garcia, Director of the National Tropical Weather Conference and Executive Producer of these programs. These programs are made possible by USAA, the South Padre Island Convention and Tourist Bureau, and Plylocks Hurricane Clips. These programs are also a team effort with Bill Reed, the former Director of the National Hurricane Center, and Tim Smith, Chief Meteorologist of KRGV-TV. And now, here's Tim Smith.
Thanks, Alex, and good morning, everybody. Welcome to NDWC Live today for July the 29th. I wish we'd had programmed today's program about a week ago as we were getting ready for upcoming and landfalling hurricanes. And of course, where we are here in deep South Texas, we just had a landfalling hurricane. We've got some great information coming up for you today. We're also going to talk about what's going on out in the tropics right now. But before we get started, I do want to share a little bit. If you don't know, I'm in deep South Texas, the Brownsville, McAllen, South Padre Island area. And I'd like to share a little bit about what happened this past weekend with Hurricane Hannah that came through. It went right across the top of us, basically. It got a little closer than what was anticipated. I'll start with a video that I just got about 2 minutes before we hit the air this morning. And this is kind of lost in the background there, but you can see it. This line of cars on the right side, and I apologize for it being kind of soft there. That's the line of cars to get into Lowe's, and that line is about a mile long. It just keeps going and going and going. And this Lowe's is near my house, which is 70 miles inland. But there's an awful lot of people buying cedar, probably for cedar fences, as much as anything, because that's a lot of what was lost. And there's an awful lot of flood water in this area, which I'll show you in a minute, but the line just kept going. That was Friday morning's forecast, and the landfall point is the very southern edge of that window. We're talking Baffin Bay, but instead it was closer to Port Mansfield. Actually, the eye was almost as wide as the area between Port Mansfield and Baffin Bay. It was a very large eye, but it moved inland. The southern edge of the eye went across a little fishing village of Port Mansfield. They were in the eye for about 5 minutes there, and that was about it, where a lot of people were in the eye for a couple of hours. So it just depends upon where you were, but it came in rather than as a tropical storm, it was as we were originally forecasting. Rather, it came in as a 90-mile-per-hour hurricane, and folks experienced that. This is what the view was in our TV station, looking out our west wall. Once the wind shifted, was coming from the south. That fence didn't fall. But that went on for a long time. And the TV station's about 60 miles inland, 50 to 60 miles inland. This is looking at the other side of the TV station, looking at the east side. The lights in the middle of the background, that's the expressway, the interstate I-2. The cars in the foreground in our parking lot. Big billboard in the background. And that's the moment the lights went out. We'd been on generator power for quite some time, but that's just what it looked like and sounded like several miles inland. This is Brownsville, map of Brownsville, the Interstate 69E coming in on the left side of the screen there, Brownsville International Airport, in the National Weather Service office. About 3:30 in the morning, a tornado formed right about there and went right about that path. National Weather Service guys went into their safe room and warnings were turned over to the Lake Charles office, and they started issuing the warnings for it. It did not hit the Weather Service, but it did hit the airport. Airport had some significant damage from that. And then it also went across the street and caught a couple of houses. This is one of the houses that was hit by that tornado. That's the only confirmed tornado I've seen from this, and it just so happened it was within half a mile of the National Weather Service office. They were back issuing warnings again on their own within about 20 minutes, I think, but they were in their safe room for quite a while, and it missed them again by less than a mile. Of course, then you started seeing issues, but the biggest thing with this, besides the wind, and that's actually in Edinburgh, again, close to where I live, about 70 miles inland. That's in McAllen. So there was some wind damage, but not bad. For a hurricane, not bad. I mean, that awning is still up, which says something. But then the flooding began. A bunch of those happened. That was on 77 between Raymondville and Corpus Christi. A lot of trucks down. But then the flooding started, and it just kept getting worse. We had, and I'll show you the graph in a minute, we had about anywhere from 10 to 15 inches of rain widespread. This is the day after. There's still places where water like this is standing. in particular around Santa Rosa, which is kind of northwest of Harlingen. What rescues are going on continuously. A lot of that. This is, again, 70 miles inland. My daughter actually lives at the end of that street. She had about 2 inches of water in her apartment. And that's about a mile from where I am right now. That's in Mission, which is just west of McAllen. And you can see all the water on the frontage road. The interstate I-2 is on the right, and that's the frontage road. And it was like the frontage road was like that for miles. Cars, all kinds of cars stranded just because of how bad it got. This, you may have seen this. This is from Reynosa, right across the river from McAllen. This is the Children's Hospital. Another shot from there. You see all this deep water. You go, where is that? Well, that's inside the hospital. I was about to say, fortunately, that was on the other side of the river, but there's no fortunate about this. No matter where this happens, this is a huge disaster, and that was in Reynosa. Some good did come from the storm. They put candles out with my picture on it. That went viral. Early on, I did a rant about on Facebook. It didn't mean to be a rant, but it came out that way about knowing where you live on a map. So all kinds of things came out about that. Lots of candles. If the weather's bad or you just forgot where you live, count on Santo Team. So I became a homeboy. Our TV station said, no, you can't sell those t-shirts. That was somebody just out in the community wanted to sell those. And they said, no, you can't do that. And I became a geography teacher because of my geography rant that ran on for a while. So it was a different storm in that respect. There's the rainfall pattern. Pardon the fact that the hurricane doesn't spin as it moves across the map, but the heaviest rain was all on the south eye wall. And you can see where some of those totals are. Where I'm sitting right now is just north of McAllen, just to the left of that 69C logo. We had about 12 inches here at my house. But here's a view of the other rainfall totals. The TV station is right where the I-2 logo is, a little bit to the left of that. We had about 11 inches there. So it was you know, for a Category 1 hurricane, as we talked about before the meeting started, category doesn't matter. This was a rain event, primarily a rain event for us here in Deep South Texas, and we got through it. So that's a quick summary of what we saw. Glad it's over, and now I'm ready to learn about what to do to get ready for the next one. Bill?
Fascinating, Tim. Glad you came through that basically unscathed. Just show one graphic here to discuss our upcoming event. This is the latest advisory out of the Hurricane Center on still potential tropical cyclone 9. I know those of you that have been following the satellite pictures, including me, thought we would probably have a closed low by this morning, but that hasn't happened. And it's still an open wave, but it's gotten stronger in the winds a little bit, and it's still moving west-northwest. The main thing I want to point out is that is if you recall the discussions we had with Mike Brennan and Ken Graham earlier this year, that with the weaker systems not yet defined, that the forecast errors tend to be larger than a well-defined hurricane. So I would use this with a grain of salt. It keeps coming south of the forecast track they have, and that keeps happening until it develops. It could come out somewhere in the Gulf rather than up the Florida. Remember yesterday they were looking up the Florida East Coast. Now it's on the West Coast. But all that could change depending on what develops. None of the models take it up to a hurricane, and with the traveling right on the islands, the big islands, that seems to be a reasonable forecast at this time. Okay. This morning, Haskell Moore, who is the president and owner of Hurricane Preparedness Training and Consulting here in the Houston area, he's taught disaster preparedness courses since 1999 and specialized in the hurricane problem since 2005. And his key focus is helping families prepare their homes, automobiles, children, and pets for hurricanes. He's had over 1,000 people attend his seminars. He's appeared on television at KHOU and on CNN radio. written a lot of articles, but I don't know if you can see this. He's going to talk a little bit about his book. It's a very thorough book. If there's one thing I can tell you, if you want detailed information on how to prepare for a hurricane, Haskell's the go-to guy. So Haskell, take it away.
You need to unmute yourself, Haskell, please.
Okay, hello everybody and welcome again. Haskell Moore here, President and owner of Hurricane Preparedness Training and Consulting LLC here in Cyprus. And special thanks to Alex Garcia and the National Tropical Weathers Conference for having me today. It's an honor to be a part of this conference, albeit virtually, with the likes of Phil Klotzbach, Bill Reed, and Lou Fincher and many others who work tirelessly every year to help keep us safe. We've got a lot to cover today, so let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, we got a good presentation. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Looks great.
Okay, great. Thanks. We had a little technical problem here earlier today. I had to change computers at the last minute, and I'm kind of learning as I go here. Okay, so let's get the legal stuff out of the way. The opinions expressed in this presentation are my own and do not necessarily reflect those of any other organization or entity. And I do want to talk just real briefly about the book. This book is this training session on steroids. It's 120 pages of detailed information. The section on children and children preparedness was developed in conjunction with a psychiatrist. The part on getting your pets ready was developed with a veterinarian, and there have been numerous other experts who've had input into this. It is available on Amazon. Just do a quick search on Haskell Moore and you can find it there. It's $19.95. If you get the book and decide you don't like it, you can return it. You can also download it and get a online copy on Kindle. So again, just search for Haskell Moore. Also, our website is hidefromthewind.com. It's fairly comprehensive. It's not nearly as comprehensive as the book is, but I do have some good tips on there on lighting, on getting your pets ready, on preparing for a hurricane during a pandemic, some evacuation notes, and probably the most extensive checklist you'll find anywhere. Again, that's hidefromthewind.com. So the seasonal forecast, I'm sure you've all seen this by now. People always come up to me at the beginning of hurricane season and ask the question, what are the numbers? What's the forecast look like? And the question I always ask them is, here are the numbers, so what? What are you going to do differently? Because if those numbers are one named storm, one hurricane, and one major hurricane, and that one hurricane comes to your part of town, it's going to be a bad hurricane season for you. So the thing that I always tell people to do is plan each season as if this is going to be the year that we get the big one. And always plan that way, and you won't be surprised, and you won't be sitting in the line for a mile long getting into Lowe's. So let's talk about the 10 commandments of emergency preparedness. A quick shout out to the original prepper, Noah. Remember, it wasn't raining when Noah built his ark. As a matter of fact, Noah started building his ark between 50 and 70 years before they'd ever even seen rain. So gone are the days when we can just sort of sit back and wait for the news to come up that there may be a hurricane headed our way and then run out to the store. In this age of the pandemic, a lot of things have changed, and I'll be talking about that in my presentation. So reasons to get started now. Number one, it really will save you money by getting started early. For instance, with plywood. Plywood tends to triple in price when there's a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. And so that's just one example of the many products that will go up in price when there's a storm headed your way. It saves time. Again, you know, these people sitting out there for hours on end waiting to get into a store. Do this early and get it out of the way, and you won't have to worry about it at the last minute. It reduces frustration and anxiety, of course. And in a pandemic, everything is going to take longer. And you're going to hear me talk over and over again about supply chain disruptions. Everything is more complicated in this pandemic. We've gotten used to hurricanes coming at us at a relatively leisure pace most of the time. This is Hurricane Ike, and we had at least 10 or 11 days knowing that something was coming. We didn't know where it was going to go exactly, but we knew that there was something coming, and if you wanted to make preparations, you had a significant time to do so if you were paying attention to the weather. But you can also have scenarios like happened in 1983 with Hurricane Alicia. I remember all too well coming home from work and taking my coat off in front of the TV on this day when they had declared that Alicia had become a hurricane and that the Houston area was going to be the potential target for that storm. So basically, we had less than 48 hours to get ready for a very dangerous, small but dangerous Category 3 hurricane that ended up costing roughly $7.7 billion in today's dollars in damage, and 21 people lost their lives. So again, we don't always have a whole lot of time to prepare for these hurricanes when they're headed our way. Start your emergency preparations with a prioritized to-do list and a shopping list. And I talk a lot about list also, and it is really one of the smartest things that you can do. As a matter of fact, if you take nothing away from this presentation today, at least I would admonish you to do your to-do list and do your shopping list now. It helps ensure you have the most critical items on hand, keeps you within budget. It tends to get folks moving when they realize how many preparations they have or how much time they need to spend on that. And again, the supply chain interruptions are going to make things more complicated in this age of the pandemic. So this is the checklist that we have for our home. And you'll see at the very top, I have gas, 2 or 3 things related to gas. Gas is the most emotional commodity there is when it comes to a hurricane. Gasoline equals mobility. It means you can get your family to the doctor or to the hospital. It means you can evacuate if you have to. It means you can go out and seek food and water. Gasoline is one of the first things you need to address when there is a hurricane potentially headed your way. And then from there, prioritize this list in the order in which you need to get things done. I would also add to this list getting an extra supply of your critical medications, both for you and for pets. If you have any pets that need to be on meds, then do it then. Now, this list answers 2 questions. First of all, it accomplishes 2 things. It helps with economy of motion. You can get things done much more quickly when you've thought them out, when you've committed them to paper, and when you have a plan. And second of all, it helps you to answer that question, how long does it take for my family to get ready for a hurricane? The other thing that you need to do is a prioritized shopping list. Now, my shopping list starts out with the highest priority items at the top, and then I just break it down category 1, 2, 3, and 4, and so forth. But in this age of the pandemic, when you want to get into a store quickly and get out, you may want to change this list up slightly to where you have the items by aisle in your store. So you would want to group all the like items together so you have, again, economy of motion and speed getting in that store and getting out of that store as quickly as possible. Out on the website, hidefromthewind.com, there are extensive checklists, as I mentioned earlier, that you may want to check out. The time to buy emergency supplies is when you see them. Again, supply chain disruptions are so common during this pandemic. For instance, it's no coincidence that I use toilet paper here. Who thought that people would be pulling guns on each other in stores over toilet paper? And indeed, that's the situation we're faced with. So when you're in the store and when you see some of these items that may be in short supply or that you want to stock up on for hurricane season, when you see them is when you need to get them. I don't know about you guys, but we use toilet paper all year round at our house. So we always stock up on these types of items. And I'm not talking about hoarding a carload of toilet paper. I'm just talking about being proactive and getting enough to get you through any supply chain disruptions, especially those that occur after a hurricane. And you're actually doing your neighbors a favor because you're buying your products now while they're in supply as opposed to when they'll be in high demand and short supply when a hurricane is bearing down on the neighborhood. One of the things that we did before the pandemic is my wife and I went to our family physician and had him do a quick checkup on us. And then he talked to us about how we need to get ready should we be faced with a case of COVID-19 during the hurricane. Heaven help us if we are faced with that terrible situation, especially if it's a serious one. But he talked to us about having acetaminophen on hand, about having drinks with electrolytes and various other things that we should have around the house should we have to treat a COVID-19 patient. This is something that you should also consider doing. When you're buying or selecting your emergency gear, get what the professionals use. And in this photo, what's happening here is this was with Hurricane Katrina, and people were literally on rooftops at the time, scrambling up there to get away from the water that was rising around them. So the water's coming up and the sun's going down. This is not a time to stake your life on a dollar store flashlight. You need to get the good stuff. And let me give you an example. And I'm going to be showing you and calling out a lot of products during this. I am not endorsed by any of these manufacturers. I don't sell them. I don't make money on them. These are just the things that I've used over the years that I've found that work so well. This is, if you can only have one flashlight, this is the one I like. This is a 3D cell mag light with the LED. This flashlight actually was manufactured November of 1998. And it's been banging around in the trunk of my car and my SUV for the last, roughly, 21, 22 years now. And it has never failed. And yeah, $35 is a lot of money to spend on a flashlight. But if you were on top of one of these buildings and you were trying to get the attention of this observer in the back of this helicopter to come rescue you, suddenly $35 may be the very best investment that you ever made. Test everything, and I could spend a full hour talking about the horror stories that I've heard from people who failed to test their equipment properly before a hurricane, people who had the wrong batteries for their flashlights, generators that didn't start, missing remotes when that was the only way to turn on an air conditioner, and so forth. So first of all, test it, make sure it works, and then test it periodically throughout the year. Does it work every time? Go test your hurricane supplies about once a quarter, get a battery checker and check batteries. I've actually had batteries come leaking right from the store in the package. So make sure all of your supplies are good, the batteries are not expired, and everything is working. And then do what I call a load test. How many batteries does that flashlight use in the course of a day? And then you can extrapolate that out and determine over the course of a week or 2 weeks, however long you want to plan for, how many batteries it would take. And I'll tell you right now, if you have a generator and you don't know how much fuel that generator uses, you're probably going to run out early. Most people do because they don't take the time to start the generator to plug in the air conditioner or, some lights and things like that to test to make sure, A, that it's functioning, and B, how much gas it goes through, because the greater the load on the generator, the more gasoline it will use. So test your generator, make sure you have enough gas, make sure you have enough batteries for your lights, your radios, etc. Every storm is different, and sometimes the storm is different along the various locations on its path. For instance, Hurricane Harvey, and those of us in Southeast Texas certainly remember Harvey, came in primarily as a wind event near Rockport, where it was almost a Category 4 hurricane. And Houston, in this photo was taken in Spring, Texas, it was primarily a flooding event. So every hurricane can be different, and this underscores the need to stay current, stay up to date on the current information, to stay tuned in to see what's going on in your area. Now, let me give you a little aside here. If you look, you'll see this gentleman on the boat who's here doing a high water rescue. I talked to my friend Clyde Kane from the Louisiana Cajun Navy, and he and I talked about the book at length before it was published. And I said, Clyde, is there, you've been in the thick of this. You guys are out there all the time working. Have I forgotten anything? And he said, yes, there's one important thing you forgot. That is, everybody needs to have their own life preserver. The life preservers tend to get blown out of the boat fairly quickly, or people will forget and they'll get out of the boat with the life preserver on and walk away with it. So he says we tend to lose life preservers fairly quickly in the rescue mission. You need to have a life preserver, and on that life preserver, you need to have two things. You need to have a whistle so you can get our attention, and you need to have a good waterproof light of some kind so that A, you can signal us if you need to, or B, we don't hit you because it's dark out there at night and we can't always see very well. So that's just a little aside, something very important to consider doing. For every critical plan A, you need to have a plan B. And if it's life or death, you may want to have a plan C. In other words, you need to become a master of contingency, and you need to think about everything that could possibly go wrong in your particular situation and what you're going to do to try to address that. A typical example of that would be if you plan to evacuate, have a plan to shelter in place. And if you plan to shelter in place, you need to have a plan to evacuate. For instance, with Hurricane Harvey, a lot of people who were downstream of the dam had to evacuate on fairly short notice. For people during Hurricane Rita who had planned to evacuate, some of those ended up sheltering in place because they simply couldn't get out. And during this pandemic, think about the safest place that you could evacuate should it become necessary. Have extra supplies in case you have to help others. Excuse me. And for instance, friends and family, and maybe some unprepared neighbors. And in this time of pandemic, when so many people have been affected financially, if you can be benevolent, if you can share your good fortune, if you're in a position where you can do so to help someone out, this would be a great opportunity to do that. The single mom down the street with a couple of kids, an elderly couple, someone on fixed income, someone who has lost their job. We typically stock between 25 and 50% more supplies than we need. We've been blessed so abundantly, and we share those in the event of an emergency where we have neighbors who need help. You need to make safety your top priority in everything that you do when you're preparing for a hurricane. You don't want to be in an emergency room during a pandemic. You may go in with a sprained ankle and come out with a potentially life-threatening condition. Now, that said, let me drive something else home. A friend of mine who is a physician said we are having so many fatalities of people who are afraid to go to the emergency room for fear of catching COVID-19. Now, I don't want to go to an emergency room right now, and I think anybody in their right mind would want to stay out of it. But if you think you're having a heart attack, a stroke, if you've had a serious injury, a fall from a ladder, anything like that, go seek help. Don't put it off. But the best way to stay out of the emergency room when you're getting ready for a hurricane is space your activities out, be careful, work with a spotter, wear your gloves, wear eye protection, and be careful. When you need it most, there probably will be no 911. You may need to be your own police, fire, and EMS. Or as my friend the police officer says, when seconds count, police are only minutes away. Or in the case of a hurricane, they may be hours away or they may be days away. So you need to be able to defend your home, whatever that means to you. You need to be prepared to fight a fire with at least a couple of really good fire extinguishers with a working gauge on them. And I suggest that you actually talk to either a physician or a paramedic, somebody in an emergency response capacity that can tell you some of the things that they face on a regular basis. And you don't want just a 1995 little first aid kit. You want more robust things in there to treat a potential broken arm, to treat somebody who has become very ill. We talked about COVID-19 earlier. And then get one of the Red Cross first aid manuals. These manuals are excellent, and they can be very helpful should you have to deal with an emergency in your own home. And then finally, avoid dangerous situations whenever possible. Roughly 88% of the people who perish as a direct result of a hurricane do so by water. And the vast majority of them walk into or drive into that water where they drowned or they fail to evacuate in a timely manner. So avoid water if at all possible. But also, here's a dangerous situation you may have not thought about. These people are tired, they're frustrated. Many of them have been up for probably 24, 48 hours working to get their home ready. And gasoline, remember me telling you, gasoline is one of the most emotional commodities. It will allow you to run your generator. It allows you to operate your vehicles. So gasoline is very emotional. So I suggest that you stock up on gasoline at the first sign of trouble. Go get your gasoline. If you end up not using it, put it in your vehicle and burn it, and you've just got it on hand in case you need it. Getting your children ready. Again, in the book, we have several pages dedicated to this, along with a lot of ideas for keeping your children amused during a hurricane. Not only did I have the help from a psychiatrist, but also had the help from my wife, who not only raised our two kids, but was a elementary school teacher for 14 years. So she contributed a lot of great ideas for that. Have an age-appropriate conversation with your kids and let them know what to expect. You're going to see it on the news anyway. Their friends are going to be talking about it. You might as well be the one to have that conversation with them. But try to downplay worst-case scenarios. You don't want to make them any more anxious than they really need to be. And know where your children are at all times, especially before and after the hurricane, and then during the hurricane in the house. Keep them close to you. Know that they're safe, and both for your peace of mind and their peace of mind, keep them close by and know where they always are. And then plan in advance some low-tech activities that don't involve the internet, because again, the internet may not be available. We were very fortunate that it stayed up during Harvey, but in the Houston area. But again, Harvey was a flooding event in the Houston area. It was not a high wind event, and high wind events tend to be the ones that knock out the infrastructure, including the internet. So have some games, have some low-tech activities for the kids to keep them amused. Getting your pets ready. I suggest every year in the May timeframe, you take your pet into the vet, have their annual checkup, and get something I call doggy Valium. And this is really just a sedative for your pets that helps them to be more comfortable. During a hurricane, it helps them relax, because these are scary. You know, our dog especially is apprehensive when we just have a thunderstorm. So you can imagine, you know, 8 or 10 hours of a high wind event, what that's going to do to your pet. So I suggest that you get a sedative for your pet. Your vet can prescribe this for you. Make sure you have all of their medications. And again, supply chain disruptions are not only for people medicines, but can also affect your pets' medications as well. Make sure you have their vaccination and certificate of vaccination in case you have to evacuate. You'll probably not be allowed to bring them into the shelter. You'll have to board them. And so you'll need the vaccination and the certificates for that. Some toys and treats to keep them amused, a pet carrier and a leash, food, water, and the bowl. If you have a cat, don't forget the cat litter and a cat box. And then here's something that not a lot of people think about, and that is a list of pet-friendly motels along an evacuation route. So if you did have to evacuate, you can call ahead, get a room, and you'll know ahead of time that they'll take your four-legged friend as well. Food and water preparedness is a really big deal during a hurricane. And again, during this pandemic, when so much of the supply chain has been disrupted, this is a common sight, unfortunately, nowadays, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. So you'll need about a gallon of water per person per day for drinking and food. And don't forget, of course, water for your pets. And I like the small 16-ounce bottles. That's how we have the majority of our water that we stock up on. And to help you plan, there's about 3 gallons of water in a case of 24 16-ounce bottles. And you'll need about 3 gallons of water per person per day for personal hygiene. And one of the things you can do is draw water in a tub or a large container. And you might want to check your tub ahead of time and make sure that the stopper is not leaking. And if it is, let's get some clear caulk and put around that stopper. And then you won't have to worry about it leaking out. And then after the hurricane, you can just simply take your thumbnail and scrape that caulk off, and it should not leave a residue. There's another product I really like called an Aquapod kit, and it holds about 65 gallons of water, and it's an enclosed bladder. It sells for about $39.95. I believe you can get them on Amazon now, eBay, and I believe the manufacturer Aquapod kit also sells them. This will keep the water fresh for up to 30 days. You can drink it. It's clean water as long as you're careful about how you put the water in it initially. It sits in your tub. It has a pump on top of it, so you can go get a glass of water, some water to cook with, or if you wanted to, you can use that pump to start a siphon and siphon more water out if you wanted to wash your face or use it for personal hygiene. Pool water is great for flushing a toilet, so make friends with your neighbors that have pools. And to do that, I recommend that you get those 5-gallon buckets from Home Depot or Lowe's and use those, scoop the water, make sure you don't get any debris in the water that could clog up your toilet, and use that to flush your toilets. Stay tuned to the local media and find out if your water supply is safe. We never, after a hurricane, we never drink the water out of the spigot until it's either been filtered, or we just use our bottled water until we hear a confirmation that our water is safe. And then we fill up our freezer, the empty spaces in our freezer, with these water bottles. I've never had one burst, and they also will serve as ice. When the power goes out, you can use them as ice. And of course, as they begin to melt, they make for a really great, cool drink of water. Good food will help keep up your morale. We've been sort of pandemic feasting during this time, and you kind of have to watch that. But good food will help keep up your morale when everything is miserable. And don't forget the comfort food. After Hurricane Harvey, we had failed to stock up on chips and chocolate and sodas and things like that. So we didn't make that mistake before the pandemic. We stocked up adequately, and we keep that part of our supply chain full. We just use non-perishable foods. A lot of people ask me about, should we buy some of these more exotic foods, the canned foods and things like that? We don't. We typically just use non-perishable foods that we eat all year round anyway, and rotate them throughout the year. Use paper plates and plastic utensils, and so we don't end up wasting water to clean those. Getting your home ready for a hurricane is so important. And I tell people cash is king. When a hurricane is headed your way, if you have to evacuate or whether you plan to shelter in place, having some cash on hand is a really, really good idea. Again, remember, ATMs will probably empty out very quickly. And be sure to get some small denominations so you don't get stuck paying $20 for a loaf of bread or something because your local store, their credit card processing is down and they don't have change. So get some small denominations as well. 3 steps to getting ready for a disaster: make a plan. And in that plan, you need to have a schedule of what you're going to do, what your thresholds will be on when you take certain actions, such as if we need to evacuate, at what point we're going to do that, and where you're going to go if you have to evacuate. And then make a kit. Have a survival kit, of course, for your family and pets. We've talked about that. But have a go bag in case you have to leave on short notice. Now, I'll tell you, we don't keep go bags in our house. What we keep is a go list. We have a very detailed list of all the things: our medication, glasses, spare glasses, phones, chargers, all of that we have on a list, and we can prepare a go kit very, very quickly if we need to. And then stay informed. Make sure you stay abreast of what's happening with the storm that may be headed your way. If it intensifies, and a storm can go, as we found with Hannah, it can go from 50 to 90 miles an hour very, very quickly. So stay abreast of the current information as the situation unfolds. Things that you need to do in the order and the priority: I suggest everybody have your essential medications. That needs to be pretty much at the top of your list of things that you need to do, is get any life-saving essential medications. Then food, water, lights, radio, and batteries. Now, they teach the first 72 is up to you, and that may be okay in normal circumstances, but during this pandemic, you may need to be prepared for everything for at least 7 days. And after Harvey, where we were actually landlocked for several days in our home, we started stocking up for 14 days. And then during the pandemic, we now stock up for 30 days. So make sure you have plenty of supplies on hand. Again, I don't recommend you go out and buy a bunch of exotic stuff that you won't end up using and have to throw away. We just stock up on the things that we normally eat anyway, the non-perishable food. And if we have any left over when it gets toward the end of hurricane season, we donate those to one of the local food banks. I don't recommend using candles or gas lanterns for emergency lighting. If you have a hurricane outside and you set your house on fire from the inside, you have a real mess. You have a really bad decision to make, stay in or go out. So I recommend that instead you use LED type lights. And again, I wanted to reiterate a couple of them here real quickly. Again, 3D cell mag light. If you can only have one light, the 3D cell mag light with an LED is one of the best lights for the money that you can buy. Now, for an area light, I like the Siege, and I'm holding this up so you can sort of get an idea of how large it is. These are among the most efficient lights that you can find. They're also bright as the old fluorescent lights, but they use significantly fewer batteries. This only takes 3 batteries as opposed to 8 batteries for a fluorescent light, and it will run for many, many hours on those 3D cell batteries. Now, there's another Siege light that I recommend. This is the small one, this is the large one for size comparison. This one is a great area light for the children's rooms. One of the things about area lights is they mimic the light that you have in your house from the lamps, and they're great to eat dinner by, they're great to read a book by, play games, and with these smaller ones, you can put them in the kids' room, put it on a low-level red light that it has on it, and this makes for a really fantastic area light for the kids. It helps them to be less apprehensive. They are water resistant, so you can take them in the shower and use them there. You can put them in the stairwells. You can put them in a toilet area. So again, they're called the Siege by a company called Streamlight, and I really like the Streamlight lights as well. Then you'll want to have a small pocket light to carry around so that you don't trip in the house. There are a number of manufacturers. I don't recommend the really bright ones or the ones that use the CR123 batteries because they are so hard to find in an emergency situation. I like just regular AA batteries. And then the headlight is great if you are having to go out and make repairs in your home or around your home during the hurricane, especially when it's dark. A headlight will free up both of your hands, and they're extremely useful. Have a professional trim your trees before hurricane season. This lessens the chance of a limb falling and, potentially damaging your home, even having the tree snap and fall into your home or pull out of the ground. And again, remember what I said about trying to stay out of an emergency room before a hurricane. And one of the best ways to avoid that is to have a professional do this. Don't do it yourself. Remember again, safety is top priority. Be sure to use sunscreen and stay hydrated if you're working outdoors for extended periods. And we board up our windows. Boarding up your windows not only protects your structure, it protects a window from being blown out or blown in and getting water in your home, but it also reduces the noise considerably during a hurricane. We found with Hurricane Ike that it made the house a whole lot less scary place when we had the boards up to help reduce the noise. And we use Plylocks hurricane clips for our windows. And again, I talk a little bit more about Plylocks on my website. I talk about it a lot on my book about how we do it. And there are various things that you can get if you live in an area like Florida where you get hurricanes very frequently down there. You may want to get some type of shutter, manual shutters, electric shutters, but I strongly recommend that you protect your windows. And panel mate anchors from a company called windstormproducts.com are good for hardy plank and stucco. Now, let me admonish you to start getting these cut now. If you're going to do it, get your plywood cut now. Get it while it's still cheap. And it takes quite a while to cut these because they have to be cut fairly precisely to fit in the window just right so they don't get sucked out in a storm. And also, if you're using plywood, I coat mine with Thompson's water seal so the boards won't bend when they get wet. Also helps protect and preserve them. It's very easy to install these, but again, they do need to be cut rather precisely. Read the instructions before you start this because there is some very significant information in those instructions on how to cut them and how to put them up. And the number of clips that you use is going to depend on the anticipated strength of the storm. Getting ready for the storm. Protect your critical supplies from floodwaters by storing them up high. Find a safe location for your vehicle. And if you don't have a garage, at least park away from any trees or poles that could be blown down. Store anything loose outside of your home. And if you can't cover your windows, move the valuables. And this is mostly for people who are in an apartment home or a high rise where you don't have the luxury of being able to secure your windows. Move your valuables away from the windows and cover them either with a plastic tarp or some type of plastic sheeting, and then secure them with heavy twine. Especially take down that big screen TV, put it on the floor, lay it down, so if the window were to blow out, it won't blow your TV over, and either drench it with water or break it. And then if you have a trampoline, and trampolines are really one of the most dangerous things in a high wind storm or a hurricane, take the mat off, bring it indoors, and flip the frame upside down. I'm going to bring all three of these up at the same time to show you. Before the hurricane hit, now we had tarps, we had some buckets, and we had some duct tape on hand before Hurricane Harvey, but I was out going through one of the local DIY stores, and I thought, don't know why, but I just kind of feel like I need to add a few extra supplies to my kit. And so I got a few more tarps. I got one very large tarp. I had no idea what I was going to do with it, but I just felt compelled to buy it. And we picked up a few more of those 5-gallon Home Depot buckets. I picked up, I think, 5 more of those. And I got 2 more rolls of good 3M duct tape. I found 3M to be the duct tape that tends to last longest and has really good adhesion. And so I picked these things up. And sure enough, this study that I'm sitting in right now, there was a slow leak that became a fast leak with all of that wind-blown rain. And so I was able to take that big tarp that I had got, cover up some of the valuable furniture that I had in my study, cover up my work computer, and make sure that it didn't get wet. And then we were able to actually build sort of a catch basin with those tarps. And we used those 5-gallon buckets on the sides, and we used the duct tape to secure the tarp onto the bucket. So these are 3 of the most important things that you can get. Also, if you lose a section of roof, if you have a tarp and some roofing nails and maybe some washers to go on that so that the tarp doesn't tear, those make a great temporary patch, and they last a really long time. If you think your house is going to flood, then I suggest you turn off the main breakers. There was a lot of cases of electrocution reported during Hurricane Harvey in the subsequent flooding. So turn off your breakers before the storm. Have your emergency gear ready to go, and prepare to ride out the storm in the interior portion of a home with load-bearing walls, and preferably few or no windows. And in an apartment, that may actually end up being the safest room may be in your bathroom. Now, after the storm, stay away from downed power lines. Power lines can re-energize on their own without anybody being near them. They have automated computer-controlled devices called reclosers that will try to restore that power a certain number of times after a hurricane. And there's really no way of telling if those lines are energized or not, or when they may energize at random. So stay away from downed power lines. And never, ever, ever let your children play in floodwaters. If your child steps into a manhole where the manhole cover is blown off, they're going to be gone. There is just no way you can recover from that. And after Hurricane Harvey, my personal physician was telling me that he had so many instances of children who, people in general, who had come into his office with all kinds of infections because they had got out in this floodwater that contains fecal matter, it contains pesticides, potentially gasoline, all the stuff that runs off of your lawn. And so by all means, make sure your children stay out of floodwater after the hurricane. Now let's talk a little bit about generators. I remember thinking back on Hurricane Alicia, how miserable we were after that storm. We were without power at our house for about 10 days, and I thought, oh man, just to be able to go to the refrigerator and get a cold drink of water, to have a fan at night. And you don't really need a big generator. As a matter of fact, the big generators that run in the 5,000, 6,000 watt range, those things go through a tremendous amount of gas very quickly. They'll use as much as 25 gallons of gasoline in a day. So if you expect your generator to work when you need it, you need to maintain it and test it periodically. I test my generators once a quarter, and certainly you'll want to test that generator early in the season, before hurricane season actually. So if there's a problem with the generator, you still have time to get it down, get it repaired, and get it working before you need it. And read the handbook. It's very important that you read the handbook on those, especially the part about when you should change the oil, and when you should clean the air filter, and when you should perform the maintenance on the generator. So make sure you not only have enough gas, but plenty of oil to last the duration of the outage. And then have a spare spark plug. I worked on small gas engines my whole life before I went off to college. My dad owned a small gas engine repair shop, and I can tell you the two things that caused 90% of the problems that people came in with was, one, bad gasoline in the engine where they had left the gas in it sitting over the winter months, and two, spark plugs that just for no apparent reason go dead. So be sure to have a spark plug and some maintenance items, oil filter if your generator has an oil filter, a spare air filter, and plenty of oil. Now this is the generator that I like, and it's very fitting for most people's needs. It's a small generator. It only produces 2,200 watts at maximum, and sustained, I believe, is 1,600 watts continuous. They're very lightweight, and you can take two of these generators and connect them in parallel with a proprietary cable that they have, and that allows you to get enough power out of one to power many more devices in your home, or even potentially up to about a 10,000 watt, 120 volt air conditioner. They don't put out 240, they only put out 120, but they're great. You can run in your refrigerator. Most modern refrigerators will run on these. Charge your laptop, charge your game, run some fans in the house, run some lights, make coffee, make toast. These little generators are just fantastic, and if you take care of them, they will last years and years. They use about a fifth as much gasoline as one of the large generators that I was talking about earlier. They produce very clean power, so they're safe for your big screen TVs and your electronics, and they are very quiet. That's very important for two reasons. First of all, it doesn't let a thief hear your generator and know that that's one running outside where they could come up and quickly snatch it and take off. And to that point, I recommend that you always secure your generator with a strong cable and a lock. But also, it doesn't keep your neighbors up. There's nothing more frustrating than being in a hot house and being miserable and not having power, only to have to listen to your neighbor's generator run all night. And again, you will want to test this before a hurricane, but if you get one of the new window air conditioners that runs on 120 volts, you can run some of those with this little Honda EU 2200i. Now for gasoline, for storing gasoline, I recommend a safety can. And I have several of these Eagle style cans. And the thing I like about them is they close very, very securely. You have to pull this lever at the top to get the can to open. There is a spark arrestor in here that reduces the chance of fire getting down into it and either exploding or adding to the fire. They're metal, so they're less prone to melt in a fire. And they only cost about $15 more than a conventional plastic can. So I only store gasoline in a safety can. And then another fantastic product that I found years ago, as a matter of fact, in 1999, when I first started teaching emergency preparedness, I found this product called Stable. And what it does is it keeps your gasoline from degrading. And depending on how you mix it, on what concentration, it will keep your gas from degrading for up to a year and a half. Because normally as soon as gasoline is blended and it's pumped into the tanker, it starts degrading immediately. And if you leave your generator set all winter long, and try to start it in the spring and you haven't put any kind of gas stabilizer, no protection in it, the odds are that gasoline has evaporated in the carburetor and formed a thin film of varnish on the internal parts that will require you taking your generator to be repaired and the carburetor clean. Also, during this pandemic, when we have our cars sitting around for extended periods of time, it's not a bad idea to add some stable to your car as well. So again, here's the book, Hurricane Preparedness for the Home and Family. Search on Amazon for Haskell Moore. And the website is hidefromthewind.com. And that's my presentation for today. And I'll go ahead and stop my share now. And we can, I presume, begin Q&A.
Great presentation, very comprehensive, Haskell. Really got a lot out of that. I've got a whole page of notes here that I wish I'd had a week ago that I could have shared with my viewers. Great stuff. Let's go back and talk about generators for a second, because in our area, we didn't have any direct fatalities from Hurricane Hannah, but we did have indirect, and that was yesterday when a family of 4 was found. They'd had a generator inside their house, and they five people, 4 of them died. And that was just actually happened Monday evening, I guess, when the police got the call. Talk about generator safety in general.
Okay, so that's a very good point, and we didn't have time to cover it extensively in the presentation, but again, I do talk about it on the website, and I talk about it in the book as well. Carbon monoxide is a odorless, colorless gas that you cannot detect, and every internal combustion engine generates carbon monoxide. And unfortunately, the first thing that occurs with carbon monoxide poisoning is you usually go to sleep. Some people will experience a headache and nausea, but very often the first thing that happens is you just go to sleep and you never wake up. Never run a generator inside your house. As a matter of fact, you want to keep it at least 20 feet away from any operable door or window, and keep that generator clear of the home. Some people think it's safe to run them in a garage, especially if you have an attached garage, but that generator can find a way into your home through doors. The carbon monoxide can actually penetrate drywall, so don't run them in your house. Always turn your generator off and let it cool off before you refuel it. And when you are filling your gas cans, take them out of your vehicle, set them on the ground so the static electricity doesn't build up and result in a fire or an explosion.
Great information, and again, stuff I wish I had a week ago to share with people. It's just good stuff. We appreciate that so much. You talk about the safety of playing in the water too. One piece of video that the network picked up from everything we did was some guy playing in the floodwaters.
Yeah, always.
That's what aired on World News of everything that happened. So,
yeah,
just not good. Great information. Bill, jump in, because we've got some good things coming in. A lot of great comments. Rob Fee, good to see you on here. Sonny, thanks for joining us once again. Here we go. Here's a question coming in now. Haskell, have you seen the personal water filtration bottles advertised by companies like Stealth Angel and 4 Patriots? The water filter bottle allows you to drink from a stream if you're stuck without fresh water. What are your thoughts on these?
So we actually have one of the large filters that we keep, but that is our drop dead backup. I know that these are good. I know that they are, a lot of campers use them. I don't know, a lot of people trust them. I personally have a little bit of concern about getting water from a dubious source, dipping it out of a pool or something like that and drinking it. It is just so easy to stock up on bottled water. And I guess if it came down to, dying of thirst or drinking out of one of those bottles, I mean, I honestly, I carry one in my car as an emergency supply as well, but I also carry several containers of emergency water that are designed to be kept on a lifeboat. They have a 5-year life span. I really prefer having water on hand and not having to depend on these. But in a pinch, if it came down to dying of thirst or drinking, water out of one of these bottles, I would do that.
Thank you. Rich Johnson wants to know if there's any comments about gasoline without ethanol. Is that
so I'm not an expert in that area. I do know that ethanol is hard on the seals of generators. And go back and forth. The manufacturers say if you're going to, most of them will say, if you're going to store your generator, drain the gas. But at the same time, when you do that, you stand the chance of the seals in the generator drying out. So it's kind of back and forth on that. What I do is that Stable 360 that I told you about earlier, that actually has an ethanol treatment in it as well, so that it mitigates the damage to the seals of the generator. So I just go ahead and use regular gasoline that has ethanol in it, but I use the Stable 360 with the ethanol treatment.
Great. Bill, jump in. I know you've got some ideas over there as well.
He knows so much more than I do about this. It's obviously I'm too ADD to get that well into the details. Just a couple of things come to mind. The pet-friendly hotels. Do you know, Haskell, if there's like a one-stop shop website to find that out, or you pretty much have to look at the chains by their name?
Well, actually, if you go to the Hide from the Wind website, on the links, it's down close to the bottom, and it talks about a pet-friendly hotel finder. And there is a link that will take you to a site that has pet-friendly hotels on it.
Yeah, we over here in Texas, we found that we have pets and we travel with them. That one can't fail one is La Quinta. They don't charge you for it either, which is wonderful.
Yeah, that's great.
Another idea on the water that we have cats, so we have to buy kitty litter. Well, we buy the tall plastic containers, or 2 to 3 gallons of litter. We save the empties, and that's our clean them up and fill them up right prior to the storm for extra water for flushing toilets and things like that.
Right.
You don't spend money on a big container. Let's see, there was another question. Oh yeah, I've been watching all this since the pandemic came out. A number of retail operations have gone cashless, which runs counter to our time-honored tradition of having a wad full of cash when the machines are down. I wonder how that's going to play out in a storm in the near future.
Well, the good thing is I found about retailers is they are very agile. They change quickly based on the situation. And yeah, I realize a lot of them have probably gone cashless, but if you're a retailer and you're open and your credit card processing equipment's down, you don't want a store full of people and a store full of product and a store full of angry customers. I suspect cash is going to be king again.
Yeah. I'm hoping you're right on that, because it could become a real problem. I really appreciate your needs for a plan B and C. We talked earlier in the year about people getting anchored on a forecast that fit their narrative and not checking for the future ones there. And I think the same thing could probably hold true. If you only have one plan, you're anchored to that, and if things start going awry, you don't have a readily available way to get out of it.
Right. Yeah, I'd always, and I use the evacuation or shelter in place as one example, but also think about, if you're a diabetic, what are you going to do if your generator fails? Do you have a way to keep your insulin cold? Maybe the right answer for that is to evacuate to a safe place where that won't be affected by the hurricane. When people are critically ill, I've had a number of people come to me and ask that, what do I do? I have a mother with Alzheimer's. If she's not in a care facility that you trust, then the thing you may want to do is you may make plans to evacuate with that person and get with a doctor ahead of time on the other end, or a care facility who can care for that person when their special needs, so that they're not affected by the hurricane, or somebody who needs dialysis or has some other very critical situation. Sometimes getting the heck out of Dodge and being the first one out of Dodge is the right answer.
Yeah, I've done a lot of talks to support groups for people with various conditions, and they're of course, we're down here on the coast, so they're probably in an evacuation mode anyway, but they're adamant with their, like MS, they can't handle heat. And the thing with Rita, a lot of people with MS died.
Yes. Due
to the heat. They never got registered in the official records because they had MS, and it was complication of MS caused by the heat. So evacuating early for people, and it's a good point. I had one other question, and then I'll turn it back to Tim. Have you seen seen an increase in interest in the preparation seminars this year?
Me personally?
Yes.
Yeah. You when you introduced me, you said that I'd had over 1,000 people through. We've actually had over 11,000 people through our training, and several thousand of those have been in this year alone. I think this pandemic has awakened a lot of people to the situations and how fragile our infrastructure is, our economy, and so forth, and the need to prepare for something like this. And so there has been a significant uptick in people who are attending the webinars and seminars that I've been conducting. And again, we've seen a many-fold increase this year, and we're happy to conduct these as well. As a matter of fact, you can reach out through Alex, and he can get back to me if you're interested in having one of these seminars conducted. They're free of charge. I do talk about my book, and that's the angle in it for me. But this really is more of a public service or a ministry type for me, as opposed to a money-making adventure. And if you knew how much money I'd lost on publishing a book, you would understand that. But we're happy to help spread this word and get the word out, and to help people be as safe. And we even have seminars that will go as long as an hour and a half if you can get somebody to sit still for that, where we get into a lot more detail.
Fabulous. Just an awesome amount of information you have there, Haskell. And I've read the book. I have a copy of it, and it's been an eye-opener, all the details you've put together there. Tim, back to you.
Bill, thank you. And thank you, Haskell. Again, as comprehensive of presentations I've heard. I've done so many hurricane preparedness presentations, and they don't scratch the surface of what you got into. So really appreciate it. And I think everybody that's watching today or watches this online will be much more prepared when the next system comes. And you have earned your National Tropical Weather Conference face mask. That's why I got your mailing address. We'll get that to you as quickly.
Right.
So thank you, Haskell. Thank you, Bill, as always. It's been another great National Tropical Weather Conference live presentation. We appreciate everybody tuning in. If you have questions and you're watching a recorded version of this, type them into the questions. We'll try to get them answered when we can. Alex, back to you.
All right, thank you so much. And again, Haskell, thank you. That was absolutely fantastic. Great presentation there. I want to remind everyone that we've got Dr. Phil Klotzbeck coming up. That's right, on August the 7th. He's going to have an update to his seasonal forecast. Then we've got two incredible panel discussions that we're planning coming up on August the 11th and on the 19th. We'll be talking with members of the National Hurricane Center, and in our second panel, we'll be just talking about messaging, safety messaging with hurricanes. So again, join us here at the National Tropical Weather Conference every Wednesday at 10 a.m. And again, thanks so much for being with us. Our sponsors once again are USAA, South Padre Island Convention and Tourist Bureau, and Plylux Hurricane Clips.